With the rising cost of chicken feed, a lot of people have been looking for other methods to feed their chickens that will make it a little more cost effective. A long time ago, I settled on soaking my chicken feed overnight, and that's done several things for me. Number one, obviously, it's cut my feed bill. In fact, it's probably cut my feed bill by about 2/3 because I couple that with the very accurate measurement when I feed my birds, so they get what they need, but they don't get way too much. Another thing it did for me, and something I noticed immediately when I switched, was that the chicken droppings are actually much less offensive. And that's because even though it's not truly fermented, it is starting to ferment a little bit. And it helps the chickens process the food, which makes their waste a little bit less offensive. So you put your feed in the bucket, and I run hot water. You're going to want to mix it as it's filling, because in the bottom of your container, I use 5-gallon buckets. I suggest you do food grade one. In the bottom of your container, your food is going to want to stay in little dry pockets, so you've got to stir it up a little bit. I would suggest you put your food in there and you fill it up with water an inch or two above the food level. That'll give you a starting point. And once you do it a couple of times, there's going to be some trial and error. Once you do it a couple of times, you're going to know exactly how much you want to mix in there to get it right. I will tell you this right now. Do not try to fill a feed bucket with the dry food and then put the water in it to the top. Because if you do that, if you fill it all the way up, the food's going to expand and you're going to have an explosion of well-expanded food, and it makes one heck of a mess. I let the food sit overnight. I usually fill it up in the morning. I let it sit overnight. And if it's too dry, you can always add more water to it. So if you're going to make a mistake with how much water you put in it, make sure it's less than what you need. The containers you use for this have to be food safe. You don't want to go through all the trouble of trying to offer a better food for your chickens and only to poison them with something that's not. So once I get it all done and mixed up real well, making sure there's no clumps of dry food in the corner, I just put my food safe tops on them and I let it sit overnight. Now I have to caution you that if you open your feed in the morning time when you're going to feed your chickens and there's a film over the top of it, or there's mold, or there's a yeasty smell, not a fermented smell, but a yeasty smell, you need to discard that food. You can get your chickens sick that way. At a bare minimum, give them sauerkraut. So be aware of that. I only soak my food overnight. Don't let it go any longer than that, especially when it's hot out, because it will start to mold. That's a very bad thing. This method of soaking your food overnight, it'll work with any type or brand of chicken feed. Clearly, you want to make a very healthy choice for your chickens in the feed that you choose to do this with. I know there are reports right now out about pesticides in certain foods and all this and that. This comes from a local mill. My chicken feed is my layer feed. It's 18%. It's got some corn mixed in it. It's got some stuff for the girls for calcium and all that, so it's really good. The duck feed I use, it's an all-flock, but it has niacin in it so that they get the niacin they need. I also do this when I have turkeys. I do this with turkey food, and as the chicks get older and older, I do it with the chick food as well. Things to consider when you're feeding your birds soaked food. The amount of water that you put into this food is obviously going to go into the birds. So it is a good way to make sure that they're very well hydrated. If you get too much water in it, you'll notice their poops get runny, and that may be scary at first. You're going to be worried they're sick. Cut back the amount of water that you have in it, and you'll notice their poops will thicken up a little bit. Also, if you're feeding your birds this over the winter time and you're in a cold place, you're going to want to be careful that the food doesn't freeze before they can eat it. What I do is I put out a little bit of food, I let them eat, make sure everybody's eating, and then I put out a little bit more. If you put it all out at once and you have a lot of chickens, it may freeze first, so just be aware of that. Some final notes about fermenting your food. There's a lot of trial and error in this process. This is the culmination of a lot of experimentation on my part, and it works very well for me. I've been doing it for a long time now. The amount of water you use, the amount of food you use, you can start with at least 1/2 a cup of dry food per chicken, and then work up from there a little bit. I would suggest giving them a little bit extra, obviously. How you feed them, how you actually distribute the food to them, all that stuff's going to take some effort, so give it a shot. This has really cut my food bill down a lot, and it's also, with the way I feed them, helped me eliminate some of the biohazard threat that is present out there, with pests eating the food or being in the coop, or wild birds being around because they're eating the food. It's really helped me a lot. It's helped me keep my flock healthy for a long time now. As with anything, especially on the internet, the easiest thing in the world to find is someone who disagrees with what you're doing. So give this a shot. I think it's going to work with you, but some people may say something to you. Hey, don't worry about it. You do your thing, and I hope this helps you. Chickens need a 1/2 cup of food or so a day to survive. Obviously, you don't want your chickens to survive. You want them to thrive. So you're going to want to give them a little bit extra. But what I did was I found these muffin pans at Walmart, real cheap, and they hold about 1/2 a cup. So 1 cup per chicken, and then some extra, and you're going to have enough food for the day. I feed them all at once, and as soon as they're done eating, I collect it all up. For me, that takes about an hour, and they'll have the trays picked pretty clean. I collect them up immediately and then rinse them off. I get all the excess chicken poop and a whole bunch of mud off of them, and then I soak them in a bucket with some Dawn, some antibacterial soap, and I let that go overnight. Now the idea behind that is if you can do that, you can eliminate your bird's exposure to any bacteria, or at least mitigate any bacteria that could be harmful to them. Biosecurity is a big deal. It's a bit of a joke in backyard flocks. That's for another video, but you want to try to help your birds stay as healthy as possible, and this is one of the ways I do it. Now I'm going to put the food out for the big coop. This is where most of my girls live. They free range, so they get out and about, but I'm going to spread this food out so that none of the birds can actually bully another bird into not being able to get the food. This works very well for us. I spread the food out far enough that no bird can reach two at the same time. All right, guys, you hungry? Doing this with the food also keeps the pests down low. Your wild birds that are going to come in and try to eat the food that's just laying around, rats, mice, and all that. It'll limit that, some bugs. It'll eliminate a lot of that stuff for you. So this is an active step in biosecurity. They'll spill food around and all that, but by the time they're done eating, there'll be absolutely no food left out anywhere. I'll take the trays in, I'll clean them, and it just doesn't leave anything for the pests to get into. All this leads to a healthier flock. All these birds get a chance to eat. No one gets bullied. Even my little bitty Bantam rooster over there, he gets all the food he needs.